You've probably never heard of it, but this one bank quietly influences every central bank on Earth. Born from UI debts, it traded Nazi gold, shaped global bailouts, and now builds digital currencies for 130 nations. It's called the Bank for International Settlements, and its story might be the most important one you've never heard. It doesn't advertise, it doesn't take deposits, yet the ripple from its decisions can raise your rent, shrink your paycheck, and tilt the balance of whole economies. So what kind of bank has this kind of power, yet almost no one outside the financial world knows its name? I'm Nate Ledger, and today we're stepping inside the Bank for International Settlements, born in 1930 in Basel, Switzerland. Imagine a bank created not to serve people, but to control the world's money systems. That's exactly what the BIS was built to do. It started as a strange experiment, a clearinghouse for Germany's reparation payments after World War I, a time when Europe was drowning in debt and inflation was turning life savings into wallpaper. But here's the twist. What began as a temporary fix quickly turned into the nerve center of global finance. Today, the BIS connects 63 central banks, overseeing nearly 90% of the world's monetary reserves. Its headquarters, a circular tower that looms over Basel, has been called a Bond villain lair for economists. Inside, it's less chaos, more quiet precision. Economists in tailored suits, guarded hallways, and a vault of economic secrets thicker than any spy novel. They call it the Central Bank of Central Banks. And that's not a nickname, it's literal. When the U.S. Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, or the Bank of Japan want to coordinate moves, they do it through Basel. Think of it as the world's most exclusive group chat, except every message can move markets, crash currencies, or stabilize nations. And here's the detail almost no one talks about. The BIS isn't accountable to any single government. It has diplomatic immunity. Its records can't be subpoenaed. Its staff can't be arrested for actions taken inside its walls. Power without oversight. That's the foundation of the modern financial world. The BIS was built in the ashes of one world war, but somehow it survived the next one too. Money, wars, and secrets. Here's where the story turns dark. You'd think a global war would shut a bank like this down, right? But the Bank for International Settlements didn't close during World War II. It thrived. While cities were burning and soldiers were dying, the BIS board meetings still went on, calm, polite, and eerily normal. It's one of the strangest paradoxes in financial history. Founded to bring peace through money, the BIS ended up working with both sides of the deadliest conflict in human history. On one side, the Allies, Britain, the US, France. On the other, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, Imperial Japan. And all of them had officials sitting at the same table in Basel discussing exchange rates and gold reserves as if the world wasn't tearing itself apart. Here's a jaw-dropper. In March 1939, just after Hitler's army took over Czechoslovakia, the Czech National Bank begged the BIS to protect its gold, about 23.1 metric tons, worth roughly 120 million US dollars in today's money. Instead, the BIS transferred that gold straight into the Reichsbank's account on Nazi orders. It wasn't a clerical error, it was obedience. The bank literally moved stolen national treasure into Hitler's vaults while Europe watched in horror. And it didn't stop there. Historians later found that more than 3,500 bars of looted gold, mostly from occupied countries, passed through Basel during the war. Two names defined this strange moral gray zone: Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's economic mastermind and close ally, and Montague Norman, the governor of the Bank of England. They were old friends. They'd been rebuilding Europe's financial system since the 1920s. Even after Schacht became a key figure in the Nazi government, Norman refused to cut him off. Picture that. Britain under the Blitz, bombs falling on London, and its top banker still exchanging letters and meeting minutes with one of Hitler's inner circle. The minutes of those meetings, what little survived, read like something out of a thriller. Polite phrases about liquidity and reserves, written as concentration camps were being built. That's what makes the BIS so surreal. It floated above morality. While nations fought for survival, the BIS balanced accounts. After the war, this all came out in the open. The Americans were furious. Henry Morgenthau Jr., Roosevelt's Treasury Secretary, called for the bank to be shut down completely. He said, "The BIS must go. This bank helped the Nazis." The plan almost passed. At the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, delegates voted to dissolve the BIS. But by the time the war ended, new priorities took over: reconstruction, stability, and fighting communism. The order was never carried out. The BIS lived on. Think about that. A bank accused of laundering Nazi gold, nearly abolished by the Allies, somehow walked away untouched and stronger than ever. The club of the powerful. Here's the part hardly anyone talks about. After the war, when the dust settled and nations rebuilt, the Bank for International Settlements didn't fade into history. It leveled up. It went from being the bank that handled reparations to becoming the command center for the world's central bankers. And the craziest part? Almost no one outside finance circles even knew these meetings existed. Every month, without fail, the world's most powerful financial figures fly into Basel, Switzerland. No press, no cameras, no transcripts, just a closed meeting in a soundproof conference room inside that round steel tower. Inside are the heads of the U.S. Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, and about 60 other central banks. Together, they represent over 95% of the global GDP. That's not an exaggeration. This single group literally steers the world's monetary weather. And here's where it gets wild. These meetings are older than most modern institutions. They started in the late 1930s and still happen every 2 months. Even during global crises, wars, oil shocks, pandemics, they never stop. The participants arrive quietly, often under diplomatic protection, and discuss topics that can move billions with a single word. Interest rates, inflation targets, liquidity injections. You know how markets react when the Fed sneezes? Well, this is the room where the sneezing starts. They don't take minutes, no recordings, not even staff notes. It's all face-to-face, confidential, and trust-based. A former BIS general manager once described it as the most exclusive club in the world. Another attendee called it the real United Nations, but for money. During the 1970s, when the oil crisis sent inflation soaring, these Basel meetings became the epicenter of coordination. Central banks agreed to manage the chaos together, using the BIS as a hub for secret liquidity lines and currency swaps. By the 1980s, it wasn't just coordinating, it was writing the rules. The BIS began issuing something called the Basel Accords, Basel I, II, and III, global standards that determine how much capital every major bank must hold to stay solvent. That sounds dry, but it's huge. These rules affect how much banks can lend to you, how risky your mortgage can be, and even how small businesses get funded. It's the invisible hand inside the invisible hand. The Basel Accords now shape over $200 trillion in global financial assets. And remember, no voter ever approved them. The BIS's own balance sheet, over $430 billion by 2025. It manages gold reserves for countries, acts as a trustee for international loans, and quietly advises on financial crises before they make the news. When they talk, entire currencies tremble. But here's the contradiction that makes it fascinating. The BIS claims it doesn't have power. It only facilitates cooperation. Yet when every central bank in the world bases its policies on those meetings, that's not cooperation. That's control. And it's not just about economics, it's about influence. The people inside that Basel Tower can shape the cost of food in Africa, the housing market in America, and the bond market in Europe, all in one conversation. But this club of the powerful wasn't just planning for the next quarter. They were quietly preparing for something much bigger, a world where money itself might stop being paper and start becoming code. And that's where the story starts to feel eerily familiar, because what came next would redefine the meaning of control. Crisis managers. You'd think, after creating the most powerful financial club on the planet, the BIS would just sit back and enjoy the view. But no, its real rise came every time the world's economy started catching fire. Because when crises hit, governments panic, banks freeze, and markets melt down. And that's exactly when Basel picks up the phone. Since the 1970s, the BIS has been the hidden firefighter of finance, part savior, part strategist. Let's rewind a bit. During the 1973 oil crisis, when OPEC cut production and prices quadrupled, inflation went wild across the globe. Western economies faced chaos. The BIS quietly organized emergency meetings where central bankers from the US, Germany, and Japan coordinated interest rate hikes to stop runaway inflation. The public never knew. But those private Basel talks prevented a collapse of currencies that could have sparked another Great Depression. Then came 1982, the Latin American debt crisis, Mexico defaulted, and dozens of developing nations followed. The BIS again stepped in, coordinating bailout loans worth billions through the IMF and major banks. They weren't doing it out of charity. It was about preventing a domino effect that could have crippled Wall Street and Europe's banking systems. By then, even the Bank of England was describing the BIS as the central nervous system of global finance. Fast forward to 1997, the Asian financial crisis. Thailand's baht collapsed, then Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia. Nearly 500 million people's economies fell into turmoil. Guess where the key emergency meetings happened? Basel. The BIS created what they called coordinated stabilization channels, basically secret swap lines that funneled liquidity into collapsing currencies. No public record, no press release, just quiet rescues from behind the scenes, but nothing tested the BIS more than 2008. When Lehman Brothers imploded, the world's banking system froze in a matter of days. The BIS coordinated the largest emergency liquidity operation in history. The Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, and Bank of Japan opened multi-trillion-dollar swap lines to keep dollars flowing across borders. In just 2 weeks, over $600 billion moved through BIS channels. That's not a typo. $600 billion, enough to fund the GDP of a medium-sized nation, rushed through Basel's invisible pipes, and while politicians held press conferences, the real decisions, the technical fixes that stopped total collapse, were planned inside that same round building in Switzerland. When the BIS speaks, markets listen, one economist said. Another put it more bluntly, it's the most powerful institution you've never voted for. The BIS's unique legal status makes this even more surreal, as it's immune to taxes, immune to national law, and its staff are protected by diplomatic immunity. Police can't enter without permission, and its data is confidential by international treaty. The vaults inside contain billions in gold, belonging to over 60 nations, yet no government can audit it. So in a world where politicians argue and banks crumble, the BIS quietly stabilizes everything, like a global insurance policy nobody reads but everyone relies on. Every time disaster strikes, the headlines show presidents and CEOs, but behind them, Basel's economists are already sketching the blueprint for recovery. Still, for all their brilliance, the people inside that tower weren't just trying to fix crises. They were planning how to prevent the next one. And their answer wasn't more paper money. It was something far more radical, something digital. So here's where things start feeling a little eerie. The same bank that once moved Nazi gold and shaped post-war bailouts is now quietly building the next version of money itself. The Bank for International Settlements, yes, the same Basel powerhouse, is leading the global charge towards central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Think of CBDCs as the state-controlled cousin of crypto. Unlike Bitcoin, they're not decentralized. They're fully centralized, programmable, traceable, and controllable. And who's coordinating it all? The BIS Innovation Hub, launched in 2019, now spanning 11 major cities, including Singapore, Hong Kong, London, and New York. Each hub works on pilot projects that could reshape how billions of people access money. Here's the stunning scale. As of 2025, over 130 countries, representing more than 98% of global GDP, are exploring CBDCs, most under the guidance or research partnership of the BIS China's digital yuan, the Naira in Nigeria, and the European Central Bank's digital euro, all trace back to frameworks and policy papers produced in Basel. The man driving much of this vision is Agustin Carstens, the BIS general manager and former head of Mexico's central bank. He once said, "The key difference with CBDCs is that the central bank will have absolute control over the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability." That one line raised global eyebrows. Absolute control, two words that make privacy advocates nervous. Because here's the big question. If money becomes fully programmable, who decides what you can spend it on or when? The same BIS that once mediated between warring nations now holds the blueprint for how your paycheck might one day move. But what's even more fascinating, maybe unsettling, is how this all loops back. Because when you follow the trail of influence from digital money back to its origins, you start realizing one truth. Power doesn't vanish, it just changes form. And Basel has mastered that art better than anyone. Here's where everything we've talked about starts to connect. You see, the Bank for International Settlements didn't just survive a century of wars, depressions, and digital revolutions. It adapted through every one of them. That's its real genius. It never tries to control money directly. It shapes how everyone else does. Think about it. The BIS doesn't print a single dollar, euro, or yen. It doesn't lend to regular people. Yet when central banks tweak interest rates, adjust inflation targets, or rescue economies, those moves almost always trace back to Basel. It's like the invisible conductor of a global orchestra that plays in different currencies but follows the same silent rhythm. Back in the 1950s, the BIS was helping rebuild post-war Europe through the European Payments Union, quietly coordinating trade settlements worth billions. In the 1970s, it steered central banks through oil shocks and runaway inflation. By the 1980s, it had codified the Basel Accords, effectively turning its recommendations into law for global finance. By 2025, those rules had expanded to Basel III and IV, covering over $250 trillion in financial assets worldwide. None of it passed through a single parliament. And here's the fact: this organization, with a balance sheet exceeding $430 billion, enjoys full legal immunity. Its employees can't be tried for actions taken in the line of duty. Its archives are sealed from public view. Its property can't be searched. Even Swiss authorities must ask permission to enter its grounds. That's not conspiracy. It's written into the 1930 Headquarters Agreement and reaffirmed by international law, so when people ask, who runs the world's money? It's not a dramatic mystery. It's a quiet reality. It's a handful of central bankers meeting in a tower in Basel, aligning policies that ripple through every credit card, mortgage, and salary slip on Earth. And maybe that's the strangest part. Power today doesn't march. It whispers. It doesn't conquer. It coordinates. The BIS doesn't tell the world what to do. It simply builds the system everyone else has to live in. Because in the end, control doesn't always look like command. Sometimes it looks like consensus, decided in a quiet room above the Rhine, where the world's thanks for watching friends. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden story behind global finance, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone curious about money's real power. Stay tuned. Our next episode dives even deeper into the world's quietest empire,